Sunday Crunch is compiled today by Charlie Cooper. View in your browser. Good afternoon. Welcome to the New Look Sunday Crunch, and many thanks to everyone who took part in our survey and suggested improvements. We hope the new format is cleaner, crisper and easier to read. All guests for each show will now be listed at the top of the section for that show, and we will add links to transcripts where available. We have also added a section with links to the front pages of the Sunday newspaper so they are easy to find, and will include more suggested reads at the end. If you have any comments, design-related or otherwise, please email Kate Day, our UK editor, at kaday@politico.co.uk. Thank you. 4 things to know. 1. Irish vote shockwaves. Ireland's historic vote to repeal its ban on abortions is making waves in UK politics, with calls for a free vote in Parliament on whether Northern Ireland should liberalise its own tough abortion laws. According to the Sunday Times, Women and Equalities Minister Penny Mordaunt, who tweeted her delight at the 66-34 landslide results, is pressing Theresa May on the issue and has the support of 4 of her predecessors. Education Minister Anne Milton, appearing on Robert Peston's show, joined the chorus of those voicing support for a vote. Up showdown. Any reform agenda for Northern Ireland would of course be awkward for May because she depends on the Northern Irish Democratic Unionist Party, who oppose reform, for her parliamentary majority. Creasy campaign. The Times reports that more than 130 MPs are currently prepared to back an amendment to a forthcoming domestic violence bill. The campaign is being coordinated by Labour MP Stella Creasy, who said this morning that ministers were quickly changing their tune on the question of a free vote. A number of influential Tories are tweeting their own support, including George Freeman and Sarah Wollaston. 2 Mogg, the merciful, May's Brexiteer tormentor-in-chief, was back on our TV screens to deliver another lesson in how to be dutiful and menacing all at the same time. Jacob Rees-Mogg, chair of the European Research Group of Leave voting MPs, told Andrew Marr that he doesn't want to be Prime Minister and that May is the best we've ever had. No, really. But he also urged her to be stronger in the Brexit negotiations and threatened to withdraw the £40 billion divorce bill if the EU doesn't agree to the kind of trade deal she wants. Moving in, if he did want to be Prime Minister, today's Mail on Sunday front page is a useful reminder to Rees-Mogg of the kind of scrutiny he'll face. The paper reports that he has bought a £5 million home right next to Parliament, closer in fact than no. 10 Downing Street, but also did some digging on the London firm he co-founded, Somerset Capital Management, discovering a string of Russian investments, but virtually no stake in the British economy. Response: Rees-Mogg told Marr he no longer runs the firm, and that besides, it would be improper if its investments were dictated by his own political views. 3. Brexit conspiracy. Both the Sunday Times and the Sunday Telegraph have news that the Electoral Commission has set aside around £800,000 to pay for activities relating to a European parliamentary election in 2019. The European Parliament election is set for May next year, 2 months after the UK is planning to leave the EU. What's going on? Is it, as the Sunday Times wonders, a plot to derail Brexit, or, in the words of the Telegraph, a sign of the government secretly planning to stay in the EU? No, says the Electoral Commission. It is a provision in our budget, so that the Commission has the necessary funds to deliver our functions at a European parliamentary election, in the unlikely event that they do go ahead. 4. Levels in national parks. Education Secretary Damien Hines was the main guest on Marr, promoting reforms that will allow schools to allow children to study technical qualifications T-levels instead of A-levels from 2021. The Telegraph has a good write-up. Meanwhile, Environment Secretary Michael Gove wants more national parks. The Andrew Marr Show guests, Education Secretary Damian Hinds, Labour's Shadow Health Secretary Jonathan Ashworth, Conservative MP Jacob Rees-Mogg, political commentator Isabel Oakeshott and Financial Times columnist Miranda Green reviewed the papers. Marr also spoke to actors Shauna Kerslake and Ben Chaplin. Transcript. Prime Minister? Moi, he may be the bookmaker's favorite to be the next Prime Minister, but Jacob Rees-Mogg insists nothing could be further from his mind. I don't wish to be Prime Minister, I'm very happy being a backbench member of Parliament, he told Marr, adding for good measure that the idea of him challenging May was ridiculous, and calling her the most impressive and dutiful leader this country has had. Watch. Get tough. However, Rees-Mogg said the Prime Minister needed to be stronger in negotiations with Brussels, singling out the UK's nearly £40 billion financial obligations to the EU as a bargaining chip the government should be using. Boiling the negotiation down to a cash-for-trade deal transaction, he pointed out, without our money, the EU faces a real crisis next March. Mogg vs. Rogers. The UK's former ambassador to the EU Ivan Rogers re-entered the Brexit debate this week with an 11,000-word lecture castigating May, the Remainer, Reversers, and Brexiteers alike. But Rees-Mogg said that despite his years of top-level experience, Rogers could do with being better informed, and questioned whether, because of his role advising David Cameron on the failed pre-referendum renegotiation, he was the most impartial and useful commentator on this. Mogg vs. Thompson. Rees-Mogg also expressed skepticism about the estimated £20 billion maximum cost of the Brexite's preferred customs model, maximum facilitation or max-fac, a figure that comes from no less authoritative a source than John Thompson, Chief Executive of Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs. NHS funding. With May's cabinet locked in debate about just how much of a cash boost to give the NHS, Labour's Shadow Health Secretary Jonathan Ashworth was grilled on how much his party would commit. He said the party was prepared to put up taxes to improve services but wasn't keen on a dedicated NHS tax. Watch. Tax rise. Education Secretary Damian Hinds was also taken off-piste and asked whether the country was in a mood to spend more money and tax on the NHS, replying, I think everybody realizes that over time it will be important to have more resourcing. One eye over your shoulder. Andrew Marr seemed to have taken pointers from stand-in host Emma Barnett, who won plaudits for her uncompromising approach while he was away last week. Giving Ashworth a hard time over one line of questioning, he told him, I don't want to go all Emma Barnett, but you're not answering my question. Heston on Sunday guests, Labour's Deputy Leader Tom Watson, Education Minister Anne Milton, Sinn Féin's Vice President Michelle O'Neill, writer and rapper Akalat, and in Croissant Corner, former Labour Director of Communications Alastair Campbell and Director of Open Europe Henry Newman. Watson vs. Campbell. Easily the most interesting bit of the show was Tom Watson and Alastair Campbell losing their tempers with each other over Labour's approach to Brexit, with Watson telling Tony Blair's former spokesman, you no longer decide Labour Party policy. I know you'd like to. Campbell does not deny the charge. Watch. Labour and the big Brexit vote. Watson declined to say which way Labour will go when it comes to a big parliamentary vote on an amendment to the EU withdrawal bill on whether to keep the UK in the European Economic Area, a line of questioning prompted by Campbell's article in The Observer today, which criticises the party's Brexit approach. Watch. Irish abortion vote. Peston spoke to Michelle O'Neill about Friday's vote in Ireland, what it means for Northern Ireland and whether Westminster should legislate for a change in the law there. She said that without an executive in Northern Ireland, other routes to reform were needed to prevent the country becoming a backwater for rights. Watch. free vote. Education Minister Anne Milton said she expected an amendment on abortion in Northern Ireland to be brought forward in forthcoming legislation, that it should be a free vote and that she personally would vote to liberalise regulations. Watch. Border poll. O'Neill said that the chances of a referendum on Irish unification were better than 4-1 bookies odds. It's my job to convince people from a unionist background, people with a British identity background, that there is a place for us all in a new Ireland, she said. Watch. Bye Bye Allegra. It was Allegra Stratton's last show marshalling Peston's frequently malfunctioning interactive screen. She's taking back her weekends but is staying on in her day job as ITV News' national editor. Peston told the Evening Standard last month that losing Stratton would be like Beck without Anne. The show itself is off on its summer holidays until September. Here's the "That's a Wrap" cake to prove it. Ridge on Sunday. Guests: Jonathan Ashworth, Labour's Shadow Health Secretary; Justice Secretary David Gowk; Conservative MP Ian Duncan Smith; Deputy Political Editor at The Huffington Post Owen Bennett; and Joe Tanner, co-founder of in-house communications, Transcript. Abortion. Jonathan Ashworth said women in Northern Ireland, where abortion is highly restricted, should have the same rights as women in the rest of Ireland. He added that women deciding whether to terminate a pregnancy should never be criminalised, and he was not against looking again at UK abortion law. Ian Duncan Smith said he was sure there would be a debate about abortion in Northern Ireland, and his view, as a Catholic, was that the woman carrying the child should make the final decision. NHS funding. Ashworth said it was right to make the wealthiest pay more tax to reduce NHS waiting times and improve care for the elderly. "Thing for your supper, I do a great Engelbert Humperdinck, Sophie, you'd love it," said Ashworth, who joked he may perform at Labour's struggling Glastonbury Festival wannabe this summer. Too many in prison. David Gowk said reoffending rates were too high and called on prisons to make work programs more available. He promised a female offenders strategy very soon, though declined to give a date. He said the government had recruited 3,111 more prison officers since October 2016, but increased use of psychoactive substances was a big problem for prisons. Perfect Brexit. Gowk didn't rule out staying in a customs union for some time after Brexit, but his Tory colleague Ian Duncan Smith saw no reason to stay beyond 2020. He said discussion should focus on the minimum system required to operate borders, whereas now it was focused on perfection. He also repeated his claim in The Telegraph that the EU is behaving like a playground bully. May safe. Duncan Smith said Tories didn't have time for a leadership contest, and besides, no more than 3 people together know what they want instead. The Sunday Politics. Guests: Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham, Justice Minister Rory Stewart, Conservative MP and Chair of Health Select Committee Sarah Wollaston, Westminster Policy Institute Director Sean Worth. On the panel, former Jeremy Corbyn aide Matt Zarb-Cousin, Conservative Home Editor Mark Wallace and Guardian columnist Gabby Hinsliff. Rough sleeping pledge, challenged over the fact that, despite making tackling the issue of people who are homeless and forced to sleep outside, aka rough sleeping, his priority in office, numbers have risen. Andy Burnham blamed national government policies such as the rollout of a new benefits system called Universal Credit and said he was sticking to his pledge to end rough sleeping in the city by 2020. Watch. NHS funding. Health Committee Chair Sarah Wollaston took an uncompromising approach to the current NHS funding debate at the top of government, saying that if ministers failed to implement a 4% annual increase in funding that Jeremy Hunt is said to be pushing for, the NHS and social care system wouldn't even be able to maintain the standstill position, because of demand for services outstripping supply. Watch. Brexit jobs for prisoners. Justice Minister Rory Stewart was meanwhile sent out to bat for his boss David Gauke, and was asked about his assertion that jobs not taken by migrants after Brexit could be taken by prisoners. Q. The point he was trying to make. Watch. PNR's politics guests, Conservative Minister for Skills and Apprenticeships Anne Milton, Sarah Wollaston, Conservative Chair of the House of Commons Health Select Committee, Tony Lloyd, Labour's Shadow Northern Ireland Secretary, backbencher of the week is Tory MP Bob Seeley, George Parker, FT Political Editor, Lucy Fisher, Senior Political Correspondent at The Times, Bernadette Smith, Director of Campaign Group Precious Life. Irish referendum. Anne Milton said it's odd that Northern Ireland is now an anomaly when it comes to abortion law. Lucy Fisher welcomed Stella Creasy's push for an amendment to the domestic violence bill that would give women in Northern Ireland the same rights as those in the rest of the UK. Sarah Wollaston also gave her support for the amendment, though flagged this is a devolved issue, but said at the very least there should be a referendum in Northern Ireland, and added she favoured liberalising abortion rules across the UK. Tony Lloyd called on everyone involved to get back to power sharing in Belfast. T-levels are go. Ministers and civil servants locked horns over the start date of new technical qualifications, but the government has decided to press on and start the first 3 in 2022. Milton said T-levels were needed to meet a skills gap, and these have been designed by employers. NHS money, more cash is need, not just for health but also for social care, Wollaston said. We need an honest conversation about where the money comes from. She argued an NHS tax is popular with the public. Sunday papers, click on the publication's name to see its front page. Sunday Express, how we won the wedding mail on Sunday. Mogg moves in on number 10. Sunday Mirror, I still can't believe my husband tried to kill me. The Sunday Telegraph, Gov plans new wave of national parks. The Independent, leaked emails reveals Parliament in recess all week. EU Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson to attend the EU Foreign Affairs Council in Brussels. Arrivals from 8 a.m. Time Brexit, Labour peer Andrew Adonis and journalist, economist Will Hutton discuss saving Britain from Brexit, presumably at the Hay Festival, 5:30 p.m. Local time Tuesday. Foreign policy. Conservative MP and chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee Tom Tugendhat gives a speech at RUSI think tank on foreign policy priorities post-Brexit, 11 a.m. local time. Wales. Plaid Cymru leader Leanne Wood speaking on a panel at Hay Festival on Wales, Women and Public Life, 5:30 p.m. Local time Wednesday. Media. Rupert Murdoch's long-standing associate Les Hinton speaking about his career at the London Press Club, 6:30 p.m. Local time Thursday. Scotland. Nicola Sturgeon takes First Minister's questions for first time since publication of major Scottish National Party economics report, 12:00 p.m. Local time Friday. TV. Tracy Ullman's topical sketch show, Tracy Breaks the News, returns on BBC One, 9:30 p.m. Local time recommended reads Jacob Rees-Mogg may not like it, but few people know more about Britain's relationship with the EU than former ambassador to Brussels Ivan Rogers. If you haven't already, take the time to read his 11,000-word lecture on Brexit from earlier in the week. Former Vote Leave chief Dominic Cummings has his own Brexit opus, from the other side of the spectrum, but interestingly arriving at similar conclusions. Did we all enjoy GDPR week? Email inbox now looking a little bare. Pick up the pieces with Politico's cybersecurity, privacy and data protection specialist Lauren Cerulis and chief tech correspondent Mark Scott, who take us through the winners and losers from the landmark reform. The Spectator's Fraser Nelson and James Forsyth write about how and why the Vote Leave campaign's controversial NHS funding pledge is now 2 years on, shaping government health policy. Political philosopher John Gray this week has the New Statesman cover story on our current age of the strong man, premium only. Sunday Crunch is compiled by Tom McTague, Charlie Cooper, Annabelle Dixon. We'd love to hear what you think. Drop us a note at tmctalk@politico.co.uk, see Cooper at politico.co.uk, at Exon at politico.co.uk. If you were forwarded this message by a friend, you can subscribe here. You can unsubscribe there too. Subscribe to the Politico newsletter family, Morgan Europa, Brussels Playbook, London Playbook, Sunday Crunch, Brussels Influence, DC Playbook, all our Politico pro-policy morning newsletters.